Welcome, 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 world. This is 360 Collective. We are glad you are with us tonight. I'm your host for the evening, Isaac Castellaz, also known as the Righteous One. I'm here with my good brother and comrade, Timothy Hampton, the Militant Wise One. Peace, my good brother. How are you doing this evening?
I am well. Thank you. I am well. I'm thrilled to be here as always. It's a wonderful opportunity to get the message out, take up the mantle and seize the day. We have to maintain the vigil, man. That's what we do. So I'm excited to be here.
Right on, right on. For those that don't know, 360 Collective is an education consulting cooperative. We specialize in working directly with teachers and educators and organizations to find uncommon, innovative, creative solutions to unprecedented challenges. We also do a lot of work through our Facebook page and through our website to promote issues that are dear and near to our hearts, such as anti-racism and anti-capitalism. We'll be talking about both of those tonight within the context of the presidential election. So this is our fifth installment of a series that we call The Race to November, Current Events in the Presidential Race. So we will analyze recent events, things that have happened over the past week or two, and talk about them through the lens of race and justice. As we do this, as we have a conversation together, Brother Timothy and I, we want to hear from you along the way. We want you to comment, react in the comment section. When we see your comments, we will put them up on our screen. We'll make sure that we uplift and elevate them, and that we build off them and respond to them, because we are educators, we are academics, we are organizers, but we are not economists necessarily, right? We are not politicians. We're not political experts. So what we're doing is sharing our insight with you, but we know you have insight to share back with us. And we know that together, when we build and learn from one another, we can sharpen one another and create meaningful knowledge and insight that we can take with us into the world and into our communities. So with all of that said, Tim, I want us to jump right in to some important conversation related to this particular election, starting first with just an update on where things stand. So this is a CBS poll from just last week that shows that nationally, Kamala Harris has a slim lead, and in battleground states, and we're going to talk more about which states those are in particular, she also has a very narrow lead. Looking a little bit more closely, though, at those battleground states and what's been happening lately, as we know, Kamala Harris has gotten out. She got out to a rather noticeable lead. She closed the gap and even took the lead in some key states after Biden dropped out and she was nominated. And now she's been on the election trail. She's been visiting from one state to the next. She was in Pennsylvania just today, if I'm not mistaken. But what we're seeing, though, is that in those battleground states, places like Nevada and Georgia and Pennsylvania and North Carolina and Michigan and Wisconsin, we see that Trump has narrow leads. And if those leads hold, he, as of today, would win the election based on the Electoral College. So any reactions so far, Tim, to what you're seeing here and where the election stands at this moment relative to these polls and other data that we're getting in this week?
Yeah, can we go back to that first slide, please? With the mad airbrushed photo of Kamala. She is not that smooth. But I think Hillary was in a better position at this point when they dropped the bombshell on her, the October surprise. And I think Hillary Clinton was in a better position nationally and in the battleground states.
That's true. She was.
Yeah. And she still lost. I don't know who the public would dislike more between the two of these candidates, Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, or for what reason. But Hillary was in the same type of position when she lost to him. That was my main point about this slide. So, this doesn't give me any kind of confidence whatsoever, because as you know, I think he will probably win on white supremacy alone. That's his platform. He's abandoned everything else. That's why he's so popular. That's who he is. So I think that he'll probably win on white supremacy alone. And if he does win, it could very well be an electoral college win if he doesn't edge her out in the popular vote. So yeah, those polls give me no confidence whatsoever as far as the numbers are concerned, because Clinton was in good shape going in.
She might have had a 7 or 8 point lead. Now that I think about it, Tim,
Yeah,
going into the month of October. Yeah,
she was in good shape, and yeah, I think she was better off than this, and he still won.
mm-hmm.
And I think Kamala Harris has at least two strikes against her that Clinton didn't have. Number one, she is a person of ethnicity. Choose the one or both that you want to acknowledge. There are still people angry about that. And two, she's following Biden, Joe Biden, who has really been maligned by the right, even though he's done a relatively decent job. I don't know 100% of his policies nor his politics, but I know he wasn't as big of a sewage show as Donald Trump. So yeah. So what's this one? The Muslim
Yeah.
voters?
So speaking of Biden, this is an interesting point that we've talked about before, and we may not so much in this conversation get into the politics and policies of Jill Stein or the PSL or
Mhm.
Cornel West as much as we have previously, but we certainly will in forthcoming conversations. But this is a good point to explore the fact that Jill Stein among Muslim voters in those swing states that we mentioned a second ago
Mhm.
is earning right now a substantial amount of the vote. These, and we're talking about thousands of votes in each case, and these are voters that would otherwise be supporting Kamala Harris. They are voting for Jill Stein or for another candidate and not Kamala Harris because of her position and her support of Biden's stance on what's happening in Israel, the
Mhm.
genocide that's happening there, the seemingly unwavering support and continuing flow of weapons and other resources to Israel to execute this terrible genocide, and now to push even Iran and Lebanon to the brink of war, right? Even on mainstream media now, they're calling it like a regional war, right, with Iran and with others. So that's pretty much what it is, and her position in that particular conflict and in that genocide, I think is could cost her in some key states. So that was one of the things I wanted to mention here. And then this isn't really too big of a nugget, but it's something to mention that despite the real closeness of the national election for president, Democrats seem to be pulling ahead in some key battleground states in the Senate. There's a chance that Democrats could control the Senate and those seats that are up for elections. So just putting it out there, we'll continue to track these elections, even though we are talking more about the presidential race. But before we jump ahead, Tim, was there anything that you wanted to respond to, or any thoughts that you wanted to share before we moved into another topic?
I'm not surprised by her, Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, losing support with Muslim voters because she has not taken a firm stance against the genocide. She toes the party line, which runs right down the middle of the chest of the bird that is the American eagle, right between the left and the right wing. She's right there. She's not going to go against however many decades of American foreign policy and allegiance with Israel and the United Kingdom, because she has been and will always toe the party line, which runs right down the middle of the bird. So I'm not surprised she's losing support with Muslim voters because she is ex post facto supporting a genocide.
Yeah, I do think that it's interesting to consider what sort of reaction there would be if she took a firmer stance or even called for cutting off the flow of weapons. I mean, which is not even that progressive of a thing to do. But if she were to go that far, how would that affect more moderate people that are on the side of Israel who see what's happening there through a different lens than you and I do? Like, what would be the trade-off between taking a more progressive position, trying to stop the genocide, versus continuing with the unwavering support in the spirit of Joe Biden, and to your point, to every president previous. So that's an ongoing conversation that definitely we should consider and keep on top of. Someone said this week in one of our posts something about AIPAC, the Israel lobby controlling basically every elected official in the country. And that seemed a bit extreme, not to undermine the point that AIPAC is hugely powerful, but to say that they control every elected official seems to go a bit far. But nonetheless, it just brings to mind for me the importance of trying to do away with the Citizens United Supreme Court precedent to try to get lobbyists and big money out of politics, because in this case, it is costing tens of thousands of lives in Gaza.
Well, as for the historic support of Israel and the reasons that the United States and the United Kingdom support Israel unequivocally to the tune of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian lives are beyond this discussion, I think. I think we, those who have studied it and those who understand it know why. And the reason that she cannot try to stop the violence or pull back on the weapons or pull back on her support of Israel is because she would definitely lose the election after a move like that. Because those who are on that other side or who are teetering on the brink, who are supporting her at the moment because she's more qualified and more educated and more articulate and has more experience and would probably be a better president. If she were to somehow falter in her support of Israel, she would definitely lose the election. She may lose it anyway, but she has a better chance standing with manifest destiny and American history and the white man's burden than she does in standing against it. That would make her a little too progressive, and even less attractive as a candidate, So I think she has to toe the party line because, she's an American and she wants us to have the most lethal fighting force in the world and all this and support Israel's right to exist for whatever reason, that is, like I said, that's another discussion, but yeah, she can't, she'll definitely lose. She'll definitely lose. If she does that.
She mentioned that several times. She said those exact words that you've used. She mentioned that not only in her nomination speech, but in weeks following, and even in her debate with Trump, like most lethal fighting force in the world. That's something that she continues to repeat. And I think that language like that is why there was initially a lot of support for her. And we saw the gap between Biden and Trump get closed pretty quickly upon Harris stepping into the fold. And now, as younger people who I think were the ones who were invigorated by Harris gaining the nomination, I think have now seen her policies as a continuation of neoliberal policy a la Joe Biden and other Democrats before her. I'll even go so far as to say Obama, even though I think Obama had, in fact, a more progressive coalition going into the White House, but he squandered it immediately by trying to pursue centrist policies and make nice with Republicans. Harris is like, she's doing that now. She's trying to define herself as a centrist on the election trail. And so things like most lethal fighting force and everything like that is, I think that may be why the support for her is waning, because if she had a more progressive position, there'd be a lot more young people talking about getting out and voting. And as we both know, young people will come out and vote when they feel like there's something worth voting for. Older people are going to vote one way or the other. 85-90% of people over the age of 40 usually vote. Young people, it's just a slim majority. It's maybe in that 60% range that will come out and vote. So, I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit later when we talk about where each of us are in our voting position. But I think it's a point worth exploring more. But look, Tim, I want to get into some of the shenanigans. Like, we cannot have a conversation about the election without talking about some of the shenanigans that are Donald Trump. So, as you and I have talked about previously, Trump had a rally in Saginaw, Michigan, a state that we both love and have a special place for in our heart. He was in Saginaw, and his campaign team was passing out posters that said "Reclaim America" on them. You can see that circled there, highlighted in the top picture. In fact, I think we've got another picture here that gets in a little closer. There it is, "Reclaim America." But lo and behold, that slogan is a rallying cry for the Patriot Front. And here's a picture of the Ku Klux Klan, Patriot Front, at a march with the very same slogan. So there's that. And then just a few days ago on the 11th, he was in Aurora, Colorado, talking about gangs overrunning the city, even though Republican elected officials have said that Trump's narrative is nowhere near the truth about what's happening in that city. And then we have Mark Miley, who was the former chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff while Trump was in office, calling Trump a fascist to the core, according to Bob Woodward. So I've laid a few different nuggets there, Tim. Where would you like to respond? What's on your mind when you hear we talk over these things?
Well, let's talk about reclaiming America.
Okay, let's do it.
I have a couple of points on reclaiming America. From who? From who? It was never yours to begin with. It was a genocide, a campaign of murder and pillage and plunder that so-called won you this nation. I'm talking about the Reclaim America ilk, and these so-called patriots who are beating their chests about reclaiming America. Reclaiming it from who? You stole it. You ripped it away from the indigenous population at the point of a sword and a pike behind armor on horseback. So, and wiped it out with basic, biological weapons, diseases. And, you did this on purpose. This wasn't an accident. As unfortunate as it is, the land was stolen, so it's not yours. So who are you reclaiming it from? It was never yours to begin with. You stole it. If you steal something from my grandson, you still stole it from my grandson, even though you've now passed it on to your great-grandson. Right. It doesn't make it less stolen. It doesn't make it less tyrannous, less oppressive, or less of a global tragedy. So this statement kind of, once in my life, it would have infuriated me. But now it just makes me look at these people with their faces hidden and the sunglasses on like the pathetic loser cowards that they are. Why are you hiding your face? Why are you hiding behind this mask? You're not proud enough to stand up and illustrate who you are and what you believe? No, because you're unpopular, you're idiotic, you're slow, you're disconnected cognitively, and you are mentally ill based on any combination of social constructs that you want to choose from. Public education, religion, capitalism, take your pick, okay? So reclaim America. It's also a dog whistle, for white supremacists and extremists. You know, we talked about the dog whistles and the jingoism that people like this believe in, you know, believing that their homeland country is exceptional just because it belongs to them, and they feel as though they built it in and of themselves and it's better than anywhere else in the world. Yeah, there's several fallacies at play here, several cognitive disconnects at play here that just, you know, are really ridiculous and have remained so in this country for centuries, all based on white supremacy, you know. And they got these white things over their face, you know. Take them off. Take them off. Yeah. Take them off. Smile. Wave at the camera. Flash the sign, you know, and then go back to Nebraska and lose your job. You know what I mean? Because you're unpopular, because, you know, you're cognitively disconnected and mentally ill based on choices that you and your parents and your grandparents and your great grandparents have made. The fighting the war they already lost. You know, it's resurging now. It's resurging now. They're still trying to win it, but ultimately they can't and they won't, which makes them pathetic. You know. It may win the presidency. It may win the presidency. It may win the battle, but I don't think there's any way that they can win the war in the long run. I just don't think so. You know?
For me, I'm thinking a lot about my own vote. As you know, Tim, I've talked a lot about potentially voting for Cornel West in this election. But the more I see of this, the more I'm coming to understand that Donald Trump isn't simply a fascist in a hyperbolic sense. He is a fascist in the truest possible way that a person could mean that, right? There are different iterations of what we mean when we say fascism. The definition that I like the most is capitalism plus racism is fascism, right? There are more traditional definitions of fascism. And I think no matter what definition of fascism you use, Donald Trump fits that definition. And so it's almost like he can do anything that he wants to do and there's no consequence for it. I mean, none at all. It isn't going to erode his support. It isn't going to change at all the base that he has. And he knows that. And so and we're going to talk a little bit about some of his other shenanigans later, when he says certain things, he's not trying to bring the country together. Like, he's not trying to do that. He's trying to, as you said, reclaim America, which means that he wants to take America back to a version of this country where only white men had access to power, to wealth, to influence, and so forth. That's the world that he wants to create, right? So he has no interest in really appealing to any other voting demographic other than angry white men and the women who love them or who are bound to them. And he doesn't mask his language. He doesn't mince his language. He just comes right out and says it, right? And there's no repercussion for it. And even in the national media, it's astounding to me how baked in Trump's bigotry, his outright fascism, like how it's taken for granted. You know, it's like Tim Walz is accused of false valor and saying he was in Tiananmen Square when in fact he really wasn't. Like, there's an issue with the timeline of when he was actually in the country versus when he wasn't. It's like the standard for any other elected official remains incredibly high, but for him, there's no standard at all, and no one seems to care. No one seems to care, not even the national media, who is entrusted with giving us accurate information. Like, no one cares.
Well, because Trump is the poster boy for white supremacy and the status quo. So therefore, anything he does, I've said this on these programs before, anything he does or anything anyone does in reference to maintaining the status quo, which is the white supremacy, is automatically justified. Automatically justified. And he is justified in doing anything and everything that he says in the name of supporting and defending, propping up, and reinvigorating white supremacy. Okay, because that he's talking about they're poisoning the blood of America, that we need to reclaim America, that we need to make America great again. All dog whistles, all phrases that have been used by extremist organizations and extremists throughout history, but it's okay. And you got status quo individuals who hear these slogans and they know what they are. And they're like, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean what you think. Like we're supposed to be stupid. I had in reference to the white supremacist notions and courting. I've had some young African American, relatively, over 40 but under 60, say that Kamala Harris is a joke and that they would never vote for her and she is not a real black person. And what else have I heard? That right-wing media is pushing the narrative that if you vote for her, you're not black, and I think these are things that are coming out of this white supremacist notion that they can divide us based on this thing. That they can divide us based on that. So they're using every racial and ethnocentric and Eurocentric trick in the book to try to run this white supremacy thing up the flagpole. And, it's working. It's obviously working. You look at the center of the country on that map you showed where all those red states are collected, and you have the blue states all around the perimeter, the larger cities, some of the chocolate cities and stuff like that. They're all around the perimeter where the status quo has historically retreated from into the middle of the country, where the spaces are more wide open and there's less minorities, and they create these bastions of white supremacy and these delusional communities with 99.6% white folks, and they call that America.
Yeah. So speaking of that, and speaking about, like, we're talking now about the tone and reactions that people have to his overt fascism and white supremacy. He said something the other day that the Harris campaign seized upon in kind of an interesting and somewhat surprising way. So Trump was in Detroit a few days ago, and he made the remark again at Detroit, at the Detroit Economic Club, that if Harris and the Democrats are elected, that the country would become like one big Detroit. He said the whole country will be like Detroit. He said this again in Detroit to an audience of people who live in Detroit and the surrounding area. And so that in itself is, it doesn't get any more trifling than that. But what I want you to react to, Tim, is not so much that particular statement, but how the Harris campaign capitalized upon it. So bear with me as I pull up this video, and then I want you to react to it on the other end. All right.
They said we were dead.
Detroit waving the white flag, the city filing for bankruptcy.
That our best days were behind us. that living here is like
living in hell.
But you know what we said? We said, F that. We rebuilt ourselves. We looked out for each other, got our hands dirty, and put in the hard work. And this guy, he don't know anything about that. We are a city of winners, of up-and-comers, of builders, the Motor City. Bigger and better. Here, we believe in freedom. We don't bow down to nobody, and we never will. And so what Donald Trump doesn't understand, or care to learn, is that when he said,
our whole country will end up being like Detroit if she's your president,
that he should be so goddamn lucky.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Okay, so what's your first reaction to that, Tim?
Well, you know, Lions are 4-1. That's, you know, but I digress. Okay. He takes this racist stance about Detroit that most people who are outside Detroit take about Detroit, because Detroit is known as one of those chocolate cities where things just went bad. And you don't want to go there. I saw a meme on Facebook where there was a guy in a room full of guns, and somebody had said, you know, there's a white guy in a room full of guns, and they said, this looks like the last white person in Detroit, you know. So Detroit has been much maligned and marginalized and spat upon by mainstream media, mainstream society, modern culture, you know, but Detroit is not doing that bad. Not doing that badly. And, you know, for Donald Trump to ring that racist trope about Detroit the way he did is going to be very effective with his base, because I know the woman who posted the meme that said this looks like the last black person in Detroit, and she's a Trump supporter. So, you know, I know her personally. I know her younger brother. He and I are friends, and I know her in passing, you know. So this speaks to his base, regardless of how fictitious the statements are, regardless of how delusional the message is, and regardless of how racist it is against an entire city, economy, and culture. They're gonna be like, yeah, I don't want to have you. I don't want, you know, I don't want to be a minority. There's nothing but black people in Detroit. They've never even been to Detroit. They don't know anything about Detroit other than what they've seen on Fox News based on what Donald Trump said, you know. And I can nitpick any community. I can find the hood anywhere. And if you go to Detroit and you look for ugliness, you find ugliness, you know. I can find a lot of ugliness in Beverly Hills. I can find a lot of ugliness in some of the richest communities in America. You know, it's not the buildings though, it's the people.
Yeah.
You know, it's the people, it's their philosophy, it's the things that they think and the things that they say and the things that they do that are incredibly ugly, run down, raggedy, and repulsive. You know, live in a nice house though, you know. So if you're looking for ugly, you're going to find it. But I don't think Detroit is as bad off as he would like to intimate. And I think it's just, you know, a whole lot of white supremacist rhetoric and white supremacist talking points. You know?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Our good friend Leon is here. Leon says racism and bigotry are as means to a monarchy. Ooh, that's a powerful word. That aims to coexist with oligarchs and elites. They are tired of the light democracy we have, because as long as it exists, it threatens their power, privilege, and wealth. I couldn't agree more, Leon. That's a great way of putting it. And it calls to mind for me his love affair with these so-called strong men in like Vladimir Putin and in North Korea and other places. And I mean, they enrich themselves financially through their government in just the same way that Trump did when he was president. I saw something the other day that showed that his company grossed somewhere in the neighborhood of more than $1 billion, close to $2 billion while he was president, which was definitely unheard of given the pattern of revenue previous to that. So, Leon's definitely on to something there. And even people who come to our page, Tim, and troll, and you know this as well as I do, people who come to our page to troll. I mean, people have even said like democracy sucks and I hate democracy and this, that. I mean, there are people who legitimately want to get rid of democracy for some of the reasons that Leon is tapping into there. Like, I know our position is we don't have enough democracy in this country, right? And then there are other people who say that we have too much. But the thing about that video, Tim, that I liked was the tone of it was plain and simple. And I think where a lot of Democrats get into trouble is they tend to talk above the listener, and they tend to look down upon people who don't support the party. And even in the way that I'm guilty of it as well. I'm not a Democrat. I consider myself a progressive, a leftist. Even the way I talk about like poor white people in rural areas can be condescending, right? And so it's something that I'm always working on. So I know that Democrats, people who subscribe to the neoliberal society that both Democrats and Republicans are bound to uphold, I know they're even guiltier of it than someone like me. And that ad was, I mean, there were curse words there. There were curse words that were bleeped out, right? You should be so goddamn lucky. I mean, Democrats need to talk like that sometime, especially when dealing with someone like Donald Trump. And so it was comforting for me, not as a Democrat necessarily, but it was comforting for me to see someone respond in kind to the sewage that comes out of someone like Donald Trump's mouth.
Yeah, I like the fact, just as a person who has worked in the entertainment industry and has done that kind of work, and the reason I understand the reason why they used a black man to voice the commercial. I understand, because that's one of those cities where somebody had to answer, and it had to be somebody like that. And I enjoyed the in your face attitude of the ad. Like, man, are you kidding me? I enjoyed the ad. I think the ad was great. It brought a smile to my face, and I agree with you that Democrats need to dumb it down. Donald Trump doesn't have to dumb it down because Donald Trump is dumb. And I think Republicans who are halfway intelligent are not dumbing it down, are dumbing it down because they know their base is dumb. They're not the smartest people on earth. I'm talking about their base. They have some elites who are going to vote for them, who are highly educated, even though they know that the Republican Party right now is a completely sewage-filled toilet, but they're going to vote party over country. They're going to vote party over conscience. They're going to vote party over reality. Donald Trump said he was going to drain the swamp. Donald Trump is the swamp thing, and so I can't understand how it is that he could come to Detroit and make a statement like that. But like I said, that's the cognitive disconnect that's present in minds like his, because it's like, yeah, I'm gonna come here. Like he went to the Black Press Club Journalists Association and started calling Kamala out for pretending to be black.
Yeah,
that is
pronouncing her name and everything.
That is the arrogance of privilege. I'm gonna say what I want to say right here in your face, and all you can do is either get over it or take it to your grave. And I think his base likes that. I think his base would like the fact that he went into Detroit and insulted Michiganders and Detroiters. You know what I mean? I think that emboldens his base, so he can't do anything wrong.
He wasn't there to win votes in Detroit.
No,
he was there to win votes in the Upper Peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
And other places, further out west in rural areas, and to maybe snag a couple votes from people in the Detroit area who have been feeling that way, as you said, for a long time about the city of Detroit. But he wasn't there at all to win the support of the city, to get anyone there to rethink their position on him at all. He was there to go in there and tell everyone in Detroit basically to fuck off, is what he was doing.
Yeah,
right?
And he's on national television. He knows he's on national television, and he's still speaking to people in Idaho and Nebraska and Florida.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So he's not even really talking to the people in Detroit so much as he's talking to his base and saying, "Look what I'm telling the people in Detroit."
Exactly.
And you know, it's courageous. You know, it's arrogant. It's belligerent. You know, but his base, that's what his base wants. That's what his base wants, and he's delivering for his base.
Okay, now Tim, listen, we got something else here that I want to get your thoughts on. All right, so President Barack Obama has begun hitting the campaign trail on behalf of Kamala Harris, and he clowned Trump. I mean, he's in his first real appearance since the convention in August. He clowned the hell out of Trump. I mean, I watched most of the speech because I knew we would be talking about it at some point. He clowned Trump. I mean, he got in Trump's ass for real. He did. But then it was what he said backstage to a smaller group of supporters who were primarily black men that grabbed the headlines. And so I captured a headline here about it, but I also want to play word for word what he said for our listeners and for you. And I want to get your reaction on the other side. This is like a 2-minute clip, I think. So we'll listen to what Obama said, and then I want you to react to it.
Making sure that we are dealing with prices that are too high and rents that are too high, and are committed to making sure that we maintain the Affordable Care Act. So everybody's got health care and cares about things like education and entrepreneurship in our neighborhoods. And that's on one side. And on the other side, you have someone who has consistently shown disregard, not just for the communities, but for you as a person. And you're thinking about sitting out? I'm not. But, you know, Cousin Pookie might be. And you're coming up with all kinds of reasons and excuses. I've got a problem with that because part of it makes me think, and I'm speaking to men directly now, part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that. And I think anybody you are talking to in a barbershop, anybody you are talking to in your house, in your family, at church, who is coming with that kind of attitude, I think you have to ask them, well, how can that be? Because the women in our lives have been getting our backs this entire time. They've been raising us and working and having our backs. And when we get in trouble, and the system's not working for us, they're the ones who are out there marching and protesting. And so now you're thinking about sitting out or even supporting somebody who has a history of denigrating you because you think that's a sign of strength, because that's what being a man is, putting women down. That's not acceptable.
Go ahead, Tim. What you got? What you got?
Well, you know, I think that you know what he said was 100% true. The first headline I read about that was that you know Obama scolds black men for not wanting to vote for Kamala. Uh, he didn't say. He said I'm speaking to men in particular. You know what I mean? He intimated black men, but he didn't say black men. And what he said was true. If you are uncomfortable as a man, be you whatever race, ethnicity, whatever you want to call yourself, if you are uncomfortable as a man voting for a female because she's female, or if you are uncomfortable as a black man, brown man, person of color, voting for a brown female because she's a brown female, I would have a problem with that too. Now, if it's a question of policy, that's a different thing. If it's a question of experience, education, or ability to do the job, that's a different thing. I know one young man who does not want to support Kamala Harris, brother, because she was a prosecutor for so many years and then attorney general. And she just put scores and scores of people of color away, you know, on behalf of the cultural other, you know, and I'm just doing my job, that whole Nazi thing, you know. That's a different thing. But I think what he's saying is something different. And I think, you know, a lot of brothers just don't want to be told anything. And it might have rubbed them the wrong way because what he said was true. Points hurt. That's why they call them points. And there might have been some hurt feelings out there. And maybe these people who think that he's scolding black people and that his words were inappropriate think he should be silent on the subject and not criticize these men. I can't see what he said that's so bad, but I know right-wing media will take it and run with it and say he's scolding black people and that he's tone deaf, and you know his message to black men about Kamala Harris was tone deaf because maybe they have some legitimate reasons for not supporting her. But I think that there's a self-hate element to it. Might not be 100% or even 90%, but I think, you know, I once had an uncle pass away, rest his soul, when Obama ran the first time. And I asked him, did you vote for Obama? He said, hell no, and I ain't never gonna vote for no nigger. Uncle, darker than me, you know what I mean? So there's a little bit of that at play too in our community, you know, little bit. There's a whole lot of brothers that that are represented by my friends who are not gonna vote for Kamala Harris, may in fact vote for Trump, and they think they have their reasons, you know. But this group of people in our community has always existed. You know, Samuel L. Jackson played a great one in Django. You know what I mean? It's those people who align themselves with the status quo, thinking that they'll one day benefit from the status quo or even become a member of the status quo if they can just put enough distance between themselves and people who look like them. People who, you know, who think like them, you know. I had another young brother tell me Kamala Harris is not a real black person, you know. She's Indian and she's just trying to be black now. But she went to Howard, you know what I mean? From her late teens to early 20s, she was at Howard. How do you reconcile, you know, her choice of higher education with the right-wing talking points, you know? And so, you know, I don't think what Obama did or said was that bad. I don't think it was that wrong. I think it was very pointed, and points hurt. That's why they call them points. And I think there's some brothers out there who might have been offended, who don't want to be told anything. You know, a lot of brothers are like that.
Yeah, and I'm not going to critique it as right or wrong, but I will say that as a white man, what I notice is that in elections such as this, the behavior and actions of black men and black women and then people of color are always scrutinized more than the behaviors and actions of white men and even white women. Now, in fairness, in the last couple election cycles, that's begun to change a little bit. But even then, the amount of weight that we give to black voters, and I won't even say wait, the scrutiny, right? I think is a definite demonstration of white supremacy in its purest form. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the appropriate time in just a second. But before I do that, I want to get your thoughts to Kamala Harris's platform, specifically to support and empower and engage black men. This is her plan that followed within just a few days of Obama's controversial remarks. And so here it is. There are a few key points. $1 million in fully forgivable loans of up to, or sorry, 1 million total loans of up to $20,000 for black business owners and others looking to start businesses. National initiative to focus on black men's disparate health outcomes. More investment in education, mentorship, training programs to get black men into good paying, high demand jobs in underrepresented fields, such as teaching is the one that is highlighted here. And then also supporting regulation to protect black men and others who invest in and own cryptocurrencies. And then the last one, legalizing recreational marijuana and creating opportunities for black entrepreneurs in this budding industry. So what are your thoughts on Harris's plan for black men?
I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. There was early on during the election cycle when she first became the nominee, there was a clip from Donald Trump outlining what specifically he would do for the black population. And there was a soundbite from Harris saying, no, I can't say that I'll do anything specifically for black people. That was the soundbite. And I knew the position that she was caught in, to say as a black person, I'm going to do this for black people. You're going to have the status quo saying, you racist, right? You're doing this specifically for your own kind. That's racist, and to this platform, there is a guy in Congress, or he might be a senator, who's railing against organizations, not-for-profits, who do these exact things, saying that it's unconstitutional because it's focused on one group of people over everyone else. So that guy and his organization will be all over her based on this. Now, let's take the last one next, legalizing recreational marijuana. I know there'll probably be a lot of people who have a problem with this in reference to black people, like why you legalizing marijuana specifically in reference to black men. My position on that is, yay, let's do it, because we're the ones getting our asses kicked hardest, fastest, and longest over marijuana. They throw the book at us twice as hard, twice as fast. We do twice the prison time, 3 times, 4 times the prison time for the same marijuana crime. They'll lock you up to the tune of $20-something thousand a night or a week or something like that for $20 worth of marijuana, throw the book at you, put you in jail for 3 months, 90 days, make you do community service. We are getting our asses kicked behind marijuana more than anybody else. That's one. 2, when marijuana was found to be illegal and detrimental and harmless began mid-1950s. Marijuana was fine before that for thousands of years. People were ingesting, consuming, using marijuana recreationally, freely for thousands of years. But in 1956, 57, there was a movement based on white supremacy to criminalize and penalize minorities, blacks and Mexicans, who were marijuana enthusiasts. Okay. Mm-hmm. So isn't this what we're railing against? The status quo and all their unreasonable codes, laws, rules, and regulations? You want to blame the weed? Blame the weed. But if you don't get high and don't go to work, don't blame the weed. You don't get high and don't go to school, don't blame the weed. It's not the weed that did it. That was your choice, and from the status quo saying, oh, it's bad, it's terrible. If you research the history on outlawing marijuana in particular, it's based on a white supremacist agenda against blacks and Mexicans. So fine, legalize it in reference specifically to people of color because they're kicking our ass over it worse than anybody else in the country anyway.
Right.
And like I said, we're railing against the status quo and what they do and say that's ignorant and out of bounds. And this is one of those things, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also, I don't know how contrived all of this was, where Obama makes these comments, which are conveniently on camera. It then gets plugged into the national conversation the next couple of days, political conversation for the next couple of days. It's into a news cycle. And then Harris unveils this 5-point plan. So it could all be, it could all be accidental, or it could be completely contrived. Either way, I think the fact that she hasn't outlined a more comprehensive plan for criminal justice reform. If you look at some of the platforms for the left, truly authentic left candidates, I mean, they've been talking about criminal justice reform from day one. So even what she's doing here strikes me as just a series of platitudes that are meant to appease Black men in particular in this case. And I think, you know, if I'm going to form an opinion on it, I'm going to ride with something that Leon is saying here, which is that, like, he found it kind of offensive. You know, like I know that you know, like, I'm listening to this conversation as a white man. I'm going to get more into that in a second when we talk about the white guys for Kamala, which I'm really looking forward to that part of the conversation. But I want to acknowledge what Leon said here. He said, I voted for Hillary and I was offended by his comments. This wasn't his first time scolding Black men. If he wants to be president of Black men, then do better by Black men. Enough Black men were surrogates for Kamala. We don't need his help. And then let me get the rest of his comment. I think, yeah, we don't need his help. He was out of his lane, basically, is what Leon's saying. So I appreciate that comment there, Leon. So let's jump into we have a couple more things, Tim, that I want us to get to. And let's do that. Let's do that now. This is more of the data around the Black vote, how it's leaning. Now, in fairness, this is from August, right? This is, I want to preface that. We're going to look at some more recent data in a second, but here's one from August from the Pew Research Center that showed that 77% of all Black voters were leaning towards Harris and Walz, and that Black men in particular, 73% were leaning towards the Harris-Walz ticket. And since then, this is a more recent poll. This is from just a couple of weeks ago, Emerson College. It showed that Black voters, now in fairness, this is not by gender, just by race. Black voters are supporting Harris at a clip of around 89% and just 9% for Trump. White support between Harris and Trump is 39%, and then basically 59% towards Trump. And then you can see Hispanic, Asian, and then other groups there represented. So the thing that strikes me there is that Black voters are overwhelmingly the most supportive of Kamala Harris. And if we're going to have a conversation about just two candidates, Harris and Trump, then obviously Harris is the candidate that we would support. So in that world where we're looking at just these two candidates and their platforms, Black voters are not the problem. White voters are the problem, because only 39% of white voters are voting for Kamala Harris. And if we go back to the 2016 election, we can see that only 32% of white men voted for Hillary Clinton. And my problem, Tim, is that when conversations like this one that President Obama had in the back room after giving a speech, which was recorded, when that conversation gets elevated to a national stage, it lets people who look like me off the hook. Because who's the one scolding white men saying you ought to be ashamed of yourself for voting for Donald Trump? How could you vote for someone who believes this and believes that and believes, like, no one's doing that, right? Like, where's Josh Shapiro? Where's Tim Walz talking about white men in particular, right? So it's like our good friend, our good brother Amari always says, we focus really well on the people that are being oppressed, but we don't often or enough shine the light on the people that are doing the oppressing. And in this case, we need to have a more serious conversation about white men and their voting patterns, because if white men were even split 50-50, there would not be a competition. This race would not be close between probably the truest expression of fascism that we've had since World War II and Kamala Harris, right? Who is a neoliberal candidate. She doesn't have a bunch of policies that you and I love, but she's not a fascist like Trump is, right? So if white men just voted down the middle 50-50, this would not be a competitive race. So black men and black women are constantly having to carry the bag for people who look like me, who are too ignorant to think critically about the election and the way that we use our vote. So that's one thing that I have to say before we jump into the next piece, which is all about white guys for Kamala, which I'm excited to talk about. But before we jump into that, I want to pause, Tim, because I know you've been listening. What are your reactions? What are your thoughts on what I've been putting down here?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think that there is a tendency to be overly critical of certain people in certain situations, especially when it comes to black voters, black politicians, black pundits, the black message, the black mission. I think there's a certain tendency to be a little bit overly critical, whereas there is no criticism of Trump from any white man. Other than maybe Bernie Sanders and a couple others, any of his white voters. I think that, there is that black people do end up carrying the bag for that.
It's always a neutral conversation. It's always we voters, we Americans. It's never white men, right?
Yeah.
Like we all need to be worried about Trump. It's never white men. You are the ones who can reverse this immediately right now. You know what I mean? So it's almost like whiteness is seen as neutral. It's seen as it's treated as a standard. And therefore, white voters, white men in particular, are never scrutinized in the way that black men or black women are.
And they never really scrutinize each other the way black men and women scrutinize each other. To the degree that we scrutinize in the public eye is what I'm talking about. I think there's a tendency for black voters to be overly critical of other blacks in the arena. And, if we could put our finger on what that's based on, then it might hurt some feelings. You know what I mean? But there is definitely a tendency for black people to be overly critical of other black people who are in these positions because they are either not black enough. In the case of Kamala Harris, where she has done too much wrong to the black community, or not black enough in the case of Obama, where he hasn't done enough for the black community. You know what I mean? Whereas, there is little criticism of Trump and his cohorts from his base in that respect.
Yeah. All right. So that leads me to the White Dudes for Harris campaign. This is a campaign initiative that is unfolding. It's been unfolding for about a month now in swing states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. I believe that more ads will be airing in other places over the next few weeks. I want to play for you, Tim, one of the commercials that this ad campaign is promoting, and I want your take on the other.
Hey, white dudes. So, I think we're all pretty sick of hearing how much we suck. Every time you go online, it's the same story. We're the problem. And yeah, some white dudes are. Trump and all his MAGA buddies are out there making it worse, shouting nonsense in their stupid red hats and acting like they speak for us when they don't. All they've ever done is screw us over. But if you're not on the MAGA train, where do you go? Isn't it just swapping out one crappy option for another? Then it hit me. This isn't about picking teams. It's about who's got a plan that's gonna make life better for me and my family. So So I've been doing my own research and decided to check out Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And before you jump down my throat, they're actually talking to guys like us. No lectures, no BS. Just real solutions that protect our freedoms and help us take care of the people who matter. And honestly, I think Harris and Walz are the ones to make that happen. End of the day, you're your own man. It's your call. But if anyone gives you crap about it, tell them it's none of their damn business.
What do you think, Tim?
Bold. Thinking outside the box. These people do exist. Preaching to the choir. This is talking to the guys who are, this is really going to affect the guys who've already made this decision to support her. I don't think it'll be effective for his base. I really don't. I think that, they will look at Tim Walz with even more contempt because he is standing behind a black female, and smiling and his cohorts and Trump's base thinks, that's a backward situation and he's doing a backward thing. I don't know that it'll be effective in changing too many minds. There might be some, in campaigns like this, you hope for a good 4 to 8%, maybe 4 to 8% you reach, but I don't think it'll be effective. I really don't, but I'm biased. I'm very, very biased because, I'm somewhat jaded in reference to the notions of the ability for hardcore, people raised in the status quo with status quo initiatives and status quo beliefs to all of a sudden just toss it over the shoulder like so much salt.
Yeah. What I noticed about this ad. So first off, Tim, I'm with you that again, we're talking about national mainstream politics, right? So in this world of a two-party system and speaking that language, I think it's the right approach. I think trying to target white male voters acknowledges the problem that you and I both understand quite well and which we've just talked about for a couple minutes. If you listen closely to the ad, you could reverse Harris, Walz, or Trump. Like you could just reverse it and it would be the same ad. And what I mean by that is this guy is talking to people about how bad Trump and MAGA are. And if you just took out Trump and it was Harris Walz, the ad would play exactly like a MAGA ad. The ad says nothing about policy whatsoever. It says nothing about policy. It talks about protecting freedoms and you're an individual and get out of my damn face. I mean, it plays to the traditional trope of the privileged, entitled, ruggedly individualistic white man, right? It plays into all that and doesn't question it at all. So it's almost like blue, like there's this term out there, blue MAGA. I mean, that's what that was. And the way that the ad is constructed to me affirms the problem that we white men have in this country is that we are not challenged to think critically about the choices that we make because we are so insulated in our privilege that our choices won't actually change anything for us. And that ad proves it because there isn't one mention of a policy there. There isn't one mention of sexism, patriarchy, white supremacy, fascism, corruption. I mean, all of the words that one should associate with Donald Trump, not one of them is used in that ad. It's just, hey, screw these guys. Get with the Harris Walz team. They're actually on our side. I mean, that's all it is. It isn't actually a policy. It isn't actually a policy position. It's just patronizing the entitled, mediocre, angry white man. And it's not asking him to change anything. It's not threatening him with changing the world around him. It's just asking him to give his vote to Harris Walz. So it isn't actually doing anything substantial. It's purely motivated to maybe get a few people to change their vote from Harris to Walz, but it is not at all designed to question or reveal or call into question the politics of Donald Trump, the qualifications of Donald Trump, the white privilege of Donald Trump. It's staying far away from that. So is it a calculated political move? Sure. Will it move the needle? Maybe. I mean, it might get a few people, but hard to say, right? Like, I see you shaking your head. I'm
40%. I mean, you know, if you give 6% on a return from an ad like that, I'd be incredibly shocked. There's just not a lot of substance to it. There's not. I mean, it didn't move me, you know. But like I said, I'm biased. You know, I am underestimating the efficacy of the ad because I'm underestimating white dudes for Kamala. I'm underestimating how many white dudes out there might be who are, you know, on the fence. You know, I am probably prejudging, you know, a lot of the people that they're talking to and about and writing them off before they've even been given a chance. You know, I'm saying that just full disclosure, you know, as an open human being who was educated in the United States and, you know, who knows what that whole process is and who's been black in the United States and has watched white folks be white for decades, you know, I don't think white dudes for Kamala is going to, you know, really bring about the desired effect. But, you know, I could be wrong. You know, I could, and I hope,
we'll see. We'll see
if the needle moves. You know, I think that those numbers that he has in the white male population are pretty frightening. You know.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, so look, Tim, we're gonna get out of here, and we'll be back next week. So there's always more for us to cover. But before we do, it's entirely possible that between now and the next time we're together, some big thing might happen in the election, and this is around the time that a big thing tends to happen. You mentioned earlier Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and then James Comey makes the big announcement about reopening the Hillary Clinton email case, and that torpedoed her election. You go back all the way to 1980 and Reagan secretly negotiating the delay of the release of hostages in Iran in order to get elected, to get over on Jimmy Carter. We can go on, right? So I'm curious to know from you if you have any idea on what kind of potential October surprise might be set to unfold. I have one thing I want to run by you, purely speculation, and I'm curious to know if you have any thoughts in reaction or any other additional ideas. But you know, Donald Trump the other day, he had this real strange episode at this rally where he was already rambling. He was doing a Q&A and wasn't making a whole lot of sense. And then there was a medical emergency in the crowd. And so the whole event had to sort of stop and shut down as this, I'm not sure if it was a man or a woman, this person got some medical care. And so then the event didn't really get back on track, even though the facilitator was kind of trying to get back into the Q&A, but they were playing music. And then at one point Trump said, "Oh, we could just listen to music. Who wants to listen to me talk anyway, or who wants to hear me answer questions anyway?" So for like 30 minutes, they were just standing there like dancing and stuff like that. It was like a real strange thing. And some people said that this is an example of Trump getting unhinged. On top of that, now he's backed out of these interviews. He's refusing to do these interviews. He's now also being a little bit sketchy with his medical records, and people are starting to ask, well, why doesn't he want to release his records? So I'm wondering if we might get something in the realm of Trump's mental fitness that bubbles up over the next week or two that could be kind of a bombshell, maybe an October surprise of some kind. But I'm interested. Well, what thoughts do you have, or any other ideas? If we were to have an October surprise, any suspicions on what that might be?
I have no idea what it might be, but I'm sure it'll be something. And whatever it is, it'll be a lie spun like cotton candy to be fed to ignorant children, right? Yeah. And as for his cognitive decline, Absolutely. Excuse the dog. I don't think any racist is competent to be the president of the United States, because if you are a racist, white supremacist, bigoted individual and you believe all these things are true, then you are apt to believe anything, right? Racism and white supremacy are so repugnant and so ignorant and so backward that if you believe these things, then how are you competent to hold the highest office in the land or the world? No, I think his cognitive decline began as a child when he was taught all the racism and all the lies and all the myths and all the innuendo, wild conjecture and bullshit. And it has continued throughout his entire life, making him the mental basket case that he is today, right? If you do crazy things like dance for half an hour at a political rally, if you say crazy things like 92% of the stuff that he says, and if you act crazy, and all of these things are based on racism and white supremacy, then are you not crazy? You know, if you're saying crazy things and acting crazy, are you not crazy? But no, because his craziness is steeped in white supremacy and based on white supremacy, and there's so much white supremacy in the country, then it's okay. You know, in the world of the blind, it's decided who are crazy, you know. And I think that anybody who sits back and takes a good hard look at Donald Trump's cognitive decline would see it there. And, you know, we talk about cognitive decline. He was never there to begin with because he's a bigot and a racist and a white supremacist. And like I said at the very beginning of this, if you will believe that, you know, you are 5'2 and a half, $135, and you can look at somebody like LeBron and say, I'm a bigger, better, stronger man than him, you know, then you're retarded. You're stupid. You have a cognitive disconnect.
Hey man, we can't. Not retarded, man. Not retarded.
Not retarded. I'm sorry. Yeah. Cognitively disconnected. Maybe behind. Maybe arrested development. Maybe something like that.
Hey, listen, you got to excuse Gen X. Gen X, man. We still, you know, there's still words that we're trying to cleanse from our.
Still words we're trying to cleanse. You know, my apologies. You know, for that one, it was a slip. You know,
hey, hold on, Tim. I got you. Hold on. Where's that?
You got the slap. Yeah. I get a slap for that. Yeah, we need the sound effect. Yeah, that's cool.
We need a sound effect.
I mean, white supremacy mirrors mental illness.
Yeah.
It really does. It's like, you know, you can look at somebody, you know, who has accomplished great things mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, and say, I'm better than that person because that person is black and I'm white. You know, come on, man. What are we talking about here? And this is what Donald Trump and his base believe, by and large, you know, that they're just better based on that. And that's crazy.
Well, that's the conversation, though. I mean, I know that, you know, you and I have talked a lot about some of the conversations that we had online around white supremacy as mental illness. That conversation is loading. We're going to come back to that after the election cycle, and we're going to have a real robust conversation about that. Hopefully, a lot of our followers will tune in, because there's definitely more that needs to be said about that, and to expound upon what you're saying, even outside of Donald Trump and how he fully and totally expresses white privilege and white supremacy and white mediocrity all at the same time. But with all that said, my good brother, we're out of time. We will be back next week. We'll be back every Tuesday until election night, and then we'll be here on election night for a little while, looking at the results as they come in, breaking it all down, reacting to the news as it arrives. So we hope that you come back. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation. We hope to see you again next time. And hey, like we always say, real power is people.
Real powers, people. Thanks for the comments, Leon and everybody else. Thanks for the comments. They were great. Keep them coming.